Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, friends, distinguished guests, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 2018 Centenary Gala Dinner of the Australian Resources and Energy Group, AMMA. Now, many of you in attendance this evening are regulars at AMMA's Gala Dinners, and each year we're providing the industry's biggest celebration of excellence across the people areas, which are human resources, workplace relations, training and development, and of course leadership. But this year, as we've already heard, is special. We're celebrating 100 years of industry support, engagement and leadership delivered by AMMA, the only national employer group for our industry, representing the enormous diversity of employers and businesses that fall within it. Now, this includes, of course, mining, oil and gas operators, but also engineering and construction, transport and logistics, maritime, facilities and asset management, smelting, refining, and all the services and supply chain and businesses, large and small, that support our industry. My name is Richard Owen, and I've been president of AMMA since 2017, but I've been involved in the organisation much of the 35 years that I've spent in the resource and energy industry, and I'm truly honoured to this evening deliver this welcome address. Now, before I go on, I'd like to make some acknowledgements. Firstly, to the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we're celebrating this evening, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders both past and present. And to AMMA's Chief Executive, Steve Knott, and his team of dedicated professional and highly capable staff. Also, to my fellow AMMA board members, Melanie Alabon, Fiona Birkin, Kay Butler, John Paul Demesh, and Tom Quinn. And to AMMA's former board members and past presidents here tonight. I also like to acknowledge the many former staff members of AMMA who have contributed to the organisation's sustained success and longevity over the years. And of course, to the families and friends who have supported those working across our great industry. Now, we're also joined by distinguished guests from Australia's political and industrial relations community, and I'd like to acknowledge the following members of the Australian Parliament: the Minister of Resources in Northern Australia and a good friend of AMMA, the Senator the Honourable Matthew Canavan, Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Public Service, Minister for Women, Minister for Revenue and Financial Services, the Honourable Kelly O'Dwyer, the Attorney General of Australia, the Honourable Christian Porter, the Senator for Tasmania and former Minister for Employment, the Senator, the Honourable Erica Betts, and the Honourable Tim Wilson. I'd also like to acknowledge our guests from the Victorian Parliament, the Member for Malvern, the former Victorian Treasurer, the Honourable Michael O'Brien, and the Member for Box Hill and former Victorian Attorney General and Minister for Finance, the Honourable Robert Clark. And from the Tasmanian Government, the Honourable Guy Barnett, Minister for Energy, Resources, Building and Construction and Veterans Affairs. I wish to acknowledge the current and former members of the Fair Work Commission and its predecessors here tonight. Also, Warren Mundine, AO, Chairman of the Australian Indigenous Chamber of Commerce and former Chairman of the Australian Government's Indigenous Advisory Council. And finally, to our special guest this evening, Australia's 25th Prime Minister, Mr. John Winston Howard, and former Minister for Industrial Relations, Small Business, Employment and Workplace Relations and Defence, the Honourable Peter Reith. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not just a celebration of AMMA, but a celebration of the role of the Australian resources and energy industry and what role it's played in Australia's past and present and its continued role into the future. Our industry is critical to the Australian economy, critical to employment and national prosperity, and critical to the Australian way of life. We're all familiar with the headline figures: half of the value of all Australian exports, almost 10% of GDP, 4% of the workforce, $25 billion in annual wages and salaries, and $12 billion in taxes and royalties each year. But you only need to consider where Australia would be today if not for the resource and energy industry, whether it be our contribution to infrastructure and development, roads, schools and hospitals, or the development and sustainability of rural towns, or for that matter, entire resource-rich regions. There's barely an area of our great country that hasn't been touched by or made better by the contribution of Australia's diverse and growing resources and energy industry. And we truly have a great story to tell. Though we must better inform the broader community about why we need to explore, develop and trade Australia's natural resources, and how in turn that delivers wealth, development, prosperity and increased living standards to Australians. We must also remind Australians about the essential goods and services that our commodities produce. The other great challenge that we have is to manage the transformative change facing our industry, whether that's through changes in technology, globalisation, international competitive pressures, environmental factors, political nationalism, or increased expectations on our social licence to operate. But our industry is and always will be in the risk management business. And we've proven time and time again that our industry will adapt and transform and turn challenges into opportunities. The organisation that I lead, ExxonMobil Australia, has a long, proud history of operating in this country, as does AMMA and many of the companies of which it represents. Now, while tonight is a proud night to celebrate AMMA, we should also take a second to also celebrate all of our companies past, take the time to reflect on present and embrace the future together. Now tonight, as we've heard, we're also acknowledging some of the best examples of success and achievement in our industry later tonight with the annual AMMA Industry Awards, covering key people areas including human resources, diversity, training and development, innovation and well-being. So I'm going to take the time now to congratulate tonight's winners for being the leading example that they provide to all employers in our industry. I also thank a number of the organisations receiving long membership awards tonight for their sustained commitment and support for AMMA. Now, I spoke a moment ago about the transformative change facing the industry in 2018, and it was indeed transformative change and social and industry change facing employers that led to the association's formation here in Melbourne 100 years ago. So it's fascinating to read the extracts from AMMA's first annual general meeting in 1918 to learn that for repatriating Australian men returning from the service in the Great War, getting them back into productive and well-remunerated work was one of the key early priorities of the association. In addition, AMMA's first president, a Broken Hill mining identity named G.C. Klug, foreshadowed significant changes, including mass industrialisation, coming to the industry as the value of Australia's mineral resources began to be understood. Interestingly enough, it was also noted that the trade union movement was a growing power and social significance, and that a great priority of AMMA was, and I'll quote, quite relevant tonight, by the way, as we came in, the promotion of a better spirit between capital and labour and contentment amongst the workforce. So for the next 100 years, AMMA would remain by employers' sides as they worked through the great industry and workplace relation changes of their time. It was in the 1950s that AMMA would begin its growth from a modest industrial relations organisation to a diverse and national employer group that it is today. The true value of Australia's mineral deposits were realised, and the huge growth meant that by the 1960s, Australia was a world force in coal and various metals. By the 1970s, AMMA was playing an important role in the development of Australia's oil and gas industry as the Bass Strait and the North West Shelf became new frontiers. Through thought-leading publications such as The Way Ahead in 1988 and Beyond Enterprise Bargaining in 1999, AMMA provided the most uncompromising employer voice in support of the great workplace relations reforms of the past 25 years. And many of you would be highly familiar with AMMA's significant role during the most recent investment and construction boom, helping alleviate labour shortages, address policy and legislative issues, and assist with the unprecedented pressures on skilling, resourcing, and people development strategies. Tonight, AMMA celebrates its 2018 centennial year at a time when some membership organisations are struggling for relevance. However, by always addressing the issues of today, AMMA remains just as relevant and engaged with its members as the industry as ever. It is getting on with the job and remains in an exceptionally strong position to improve value and service to members in 2018 and beyond. On behalf of the AMMA board, I thank each and every AMMA member for your continued membership, support and engagement as we collectively deliver national prosperity and create a brighter future for all Australians. Now finally, ladies and gentlemen, it would be remiss of me to talk about the significant workplace relation reforms of the past 25 years without acknowledging our special guest, Australia's 25th and second longest serving Prime Minister, Mr. John Howard. AMMA's focus on workplace relations and productivity is linked in many ways to the key reforms that the Howard government set and achieved. Under Mr. Howard's government, our industry's gross value added rose by more than 50% and employment grew by an incredible 83%. The workplace relations reforms of Mr. Howard and his minister, Peter Reith, who we're also privileged to have here with us tonight, delivered enormous benefits to our nation. This included wages growth at its strongest for the past 40 years and Australia's unemployment rate dramatically reduced from 8.4% to 3.9%. Tonight, AMMA wishes to acknowledge the achievements of Mr. Howard and Mr. Reith in delivering these critical reforms. Thank you both for being here tonight to acknowledge the strong relationship between your government and Australia's resource and energy industry. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Howard to share some reflections on the policy environment in Australia, including the current battle for ideas for future regulation of our workplaces. Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Howard.